Welcome to the Unraveling the Scriptures channel. The Bible is a fascinating book, full of mysteries and curiosities that take us back to the origins of divine creation, as narrated in its opening chapters. There, we find the formation of the first man and woman, shaped by God's own hands. Additionally, it reveals significant events in the lives of Adam and Eve's first children, the eldest, Cain, the second-born, Abel, and following the tragic conflict between them, the third son, Seth. But a perplexing question arises. What became of Cain's descendants? Where are his descendants today? Could there still be traces of this lineage in our world? This is the very enigma we are going to explore in this video. So, if you too are fascinated by these stories and want to uncover more about the mystery of Cain's descendants, give this video a like now and share it with friends and family who love diving into the secrets of the scriptures and biblical genealogies. Stick around until the end and find out. Where are Cain's descendants and who are they today? Adam and his wife Eve had their first child, whom they named Cain, marking the couple's firstborn. Shortly after, Eve joyfully declared, "I have gotten a man with the Lord's help." Later, the couple had another son, whom they named Abel. While Abel devoted himself to shepherding, Cain focused his efforts on agriculture. The story of Adam and Eve's first sons is widely known and recorded, but the book of Hebrews, especially chapter 11, along with ancient Semitic Jewish tradition, brings intriguing details about these two brothers. In verse 4 of Hebrews 11 we read, "By faith Abel offered a better sacrifice to God than Cain did. By faith he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith Abel still speaks, even though he is dead." This biblical passage highlights Abel as someone whose sincere devotion led to God's acceptance of his offering. In ancient Jewish tradition, there is a view that reinforces this idea. Abel, with a humble heart, offered God his very best, a pure and authentic sacrifice. As a shepherd, he chose the best of his flock to dedicate to the Lord, a gesture that symbolized not only his faith, but also the generosity of his spirit and his reverence. Abel presented his finest lambs with sincerity and gratitude, contrasting with Cain's offering and showcasing the depth of his devotion. According to tradition, Cain, as a farmer, chose to offer the fruits of his harvest to God. However, these fruits did not represent the best of his produce. They were of lower quality. In contrast, Abel, his brother, was dedicated to offering the best of his flock, selecting the healthiest and most valuable animal as a sacrifice. The difference between their offerings was not only in the elements chosen, but also in the brothers' intentions. While Abel offered generously and sincerely, Cain seemed more interested in fulfilling a formality. For this reason, God favored Abel's honest and selfless offering, which reflected a dedicated and truthful heart. The scriptures and ancient Jewish traditions suggest that, overcome with frustration and anger upon seeing his offering rejected, Cain committed the shocking act of killing his own brother, Abel. This act marked the first recorded murder in the Bible, carrying both mystery and a warning about the consequences of envy and wrath. From this event, the biblical narrative continues with further details about Cain's life, its repercussions, and his legacy. It's also worth noting that, according to some interpretations, the land of Nod does not refer to a person, but to the territory where Cain was sent after his confrontation with God, symbolizing his state of exile and separation. The land of Nod is mentioned in Genesis 4:16-17, shortly after Cain murders his brother Abel. As punishment for this crime, God determined that Cain would wander the earth, becoming a homeless wanderer. Verse 16 states, "So Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden." This land became inseparable from the image of Cain and his descendants, symbolizing the cost of his actions. Beyond the literal sense in the biblical narrative, the land of Nod is interpreted by some as a profound symbol of spiritual exile. By distancing Cain from his presence, God condemned him to a life of alienation and isolation, a life marked by the absence of divine contact. Nod, therefore, represents more than a physical location. It is a reflection of a man condemned to live without God's support, a direct consequence of his crime and a warning about the repercussions of anger and resentment. In Hebrew, Nod means wandering or land of errancy, and it is not considered a proper name. In ancient Jewish tradition and other early texts, Cain's wife is mentioned as Avan. According to some interpretations and traditions, Avan was one of Cain and Abel's sisters, who also became Cain's wife. A curious and lesser discussed aspect of the Cain and Abel narrative is the question of age. Although typically portrayed as young men, some rabbis and scholars suggest that Cain was about 70 years old when he killed Abel, who in turn was around 60. After being exiled to the land of Nod, Cain and Avan, his wife and sister, had a son named Enoch. It is essential to clarify that this Enoch is not the same as the Enoch from Seth's lineage, a distinct figure in the Bible. According to biblical accounts, Cain established a city in the land of wandering and had more sons and daughters with Avan, initiating Cain's lineage. Cain's descendants prospered in that city and spread to other regions, although often viewed with a degree of suspicion. Nevertheless, among Cain's descendants were individuals who made significant contributions to cultural and artistic development, introducing a variety of music and instruments, such as flutes and lyres, alongside other manual and artistic skills. These descendants also included those who dedicated themselves to cattle raising and tent dwelling, seeking a peaceful and harmonious existence. The biblical account in Genesis chapter 4, beginning at verse 17, tells us that Cain and his wife had a son named Enoch, and Cain, in his honor, built a city bearing his name. The lineage continued with Enoch, the father of Irad. Irad, in turn, fathered Mehujael, who was the father of Methushael. And finally, Methushael fathered Lamech, continuing the genealogy. The trajectory of Cain's descendants demonstrates that, even under critical scrutiny, they left a legacy of cultural and familial contributions marked by a pursuit of productive and creative life. Lamech is a notable figure in Scripture, recognized as one of the first to practice polygamy by marrying two women, Ada and Zillah. He is also remembered for a poem he recited to them, recorded in the Bible, in which he mentions committing homicide in self-defense and promises vengeance against those who would harm him. Lamech's union with Ada resulted in the birth of Jabal, considered the ancestor of livestock herders and those living in tents, leading a nomadic and pastoral life. Jabal had a brother, Jubal, who became the forefather of skilled musicians, particularly in instruments such as the lyre and flute, highlighting the cultural role of Cain's descendants in music and the arts. In addition to these talents, verse 22 of Genesis 4 reveals that Zillah had a son named Tubal-Cain, a highly skilled blacksmith who worked with bronze and iron, contributing essential crafts for his time. Tubal-Cain had a sister named Naamah, completing this diverse lineage. Thus, Cain's descendants displayed a set of skills and talents, musicians, blacksmiths, shepherds, and nomads, that marked their presence in arts, livestock, and metallurgy, leaving a varied and significant legacy in history. Today, various biased and unfounded theories exist about Cain's descendants, which completely lack biblical or historical basis. Nonetheless, for clarity, it's worth mentioning some of these interpretations, as, unfortunately, some people believe and even propagate these ideas. One of the most frequently cited theories associates the mark of Cain with African people, suggesting that Cain's descendants are represented by black individuals. This interpretation, besides being absurd, is a construction without any support in Scripture and serves only as a justification for racism and prejudice, perpetuating harmful and discriminatory ideas that must be confronted. It is important to emphasize that the Bible makes no mention of physical or ethnic characteristics when discussing Cain and his descendants. Any interpretation in this direction is a distortion that ignores the context and the original message of the biblical text. Another entirely mistaken interpretation that sometimes arises is the idea that the Roma people are descendants of Cain, based on the false association between the itinerant lifestyle of the Roma and the wanderer status attributed to Cain in the biblical narrative. Like the others, this idea lacks any biblical or historical backing, serving as yet another example of distorted interpretation used to justify prejudices. The third, incorrect and equally prejudiced interpretation associates Cain's descendants with Asian peoples such as the Chinese, Japanese, and Koreans. This theory baselessly claims that the mark of Cain is identified by physical traits such as almond-shaped eyes. This not only is a misreading of the biblical text, but also reinforces racist and absurd stereotypes without any basis in Scripture. Returning to the first interpretation, which links the mark of Cain to skin color, it's essential to clarify that the Bible makes no connection between Cain's mark and skin color, much less with black skin. It's worth noting that both Cain's and Seth's lineages included individuals with dark skin, which entirely invalidates this theory. Furthermore, when the scriptures reference black-skinned people, they use specific terms, such as Ham and Cush, with no association with Cain. The second interpretation, suggesting that the Roma people are Cain's descendants, is also unfounded since nomadism is not exclusive to the Roma, either in modern or ancient times. Many nomadic groups have emerged throughout history, including Semitic peoples, who often moved from one region to another in search of resources and better conditions. Peoples such as the Assyrians, Lebanese, Arabs, and Jews, for instance, spread across various regions including Europe, and this mobility was a common practice. Therefore, attributing a nomadic condition as an inheritance of Cain lacks solid grounding. Similarly, the final interpretation that associates Asians with Cain's descendants finds no support. The concept of Cain's mark in the Bible makes no mention of physical characteristics like the eyes, much less specific traits such as almond-shaped eyes. According to the biblical narrative, Adam was formed from the dust of the earth, that is, from clay, symbolically suggesting a common origin that could give rise to the various ethnicities and peoples we observe today. The diverse ethnicities comprising humanity today existed before the flood in both Cain's and Seth's lineages, including people from diverse ethnic origins: white, black, Asian, with indigenous characteristics, Semitic, and others. However, an intriguing question remains. Where are Cain's descendants, as mentioned in Genesis chapter 6, verse 1, today? This verse states, "When human beings began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them." Although brief, this passage highlights the expansion of humanity, using the Hebrew word Adam, meaning humanity, and also employed in Aramaic. This term suggests that all lineages, including Cain's and Seth's, began to mix and multiply from this point on. Additionally, theories suggest a possible link between Noah's lineage and Cain's, as it is possible that Noah's mother, his wife, or even his sons' wives might have roots in Cain's lineage. It's interesting to note that Genesis chapter 6, verse 1 emphasizes that all humanity, or the descendants of Adam from both lineages, Seth's and Cain's, began to multiply and intermingle. This indicates that the descendants of both lineages started interrelating, and it was in this context that many daughters were born, representing the continuation of Cain's lineage. Therefore, his lineage remains alive today, flowing in everyone's veins. We could say then that we are descendants of both Seth and Cain, as these lineages merged over time. Answering the initial question of this video, Cain's descendants are spread throughout the earth, just as we all are products of Seth, Cain, Adam, and Eve's lineages. This intertwining of lineages intensified especially after the flood, with Noah and his 3 sons continuing humanity's story. And now, we want to hear from you. Did you know about these interpretations regarding Cain's descendants? Have you heard of any of these distorted theories before? Leave your comment below so we can continue this discussion. Thank you to everyone who watched the video this far. May God bless you all and see you soon.